The Once and Future Present, Episode 9, Perspective and Power, brought to you by Hammer History Productions. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Once and Future Present. I'm Casey, your host, and today we're doing something a little different. We have a special guest with us, Professor Lucia Romano, art historian and expert on the Italian Renaissance. Professor Theo and Dr. Morgan are here as always. Today's episode is all about how European art changed from the medieval period into the Renaissance. So, Professor Romano, what was going on with art before the Renaissance?
Great to be here, Casey. To start late medieval art, we're talking about roughly the 1200s and early 1300s, was deeply religious. Most of it was created for churches, so the themes were overwhelmingly Christian. Scenes of the Virgin Mary, Christ, the saints. Figures were stylized, symbolic. They floated in golden backgrounds. Think of it less as capturing reality and more as telling a spiritual truth.
Right. It wasn't about how things looked in the real world. It was about conveying a message of divine order. The proportions could be off, the faces could all look alike. That wasn't the point. The art reflected a worldview where heaven was the most real place.
So when does that change? What makes Renaissance art different?
The big shift comes with a figure named Giotto. He was painting in the early 1300s, and he starts to break the rules. His figures have weight. They cast shadows. They stand in space. Giotto starts to care about how things look, not just what they mean.
This is part of a broader intellectual transformation we call humanism. Renaissance humanists look back to ancient Rome and Greece, not just for inspiration, but for ways to think about human experience. That shift in values gets reflected in the visual arts.
And humanism wasn't anti-Christian, but it did emphasize the dignity and potential of human beings. You start to see that in how artists portray the body, how they treat individual emotions. The physical world becomes meaningful in itself.
So if I walked into a church in 1300 and then into one in 1500, the art would feel totally different?
Exactly. In a 1300 church, you'd see flat icons, gold backgrounds, and a kind of timeless symbolic space. In a 1500 church, like Santa Maria Novella in Florence, you might see frescoes that use linear perspective to create depth, natural light and shadow, and figures that look like real people with muscles, wrinkles, and emotions.
Can you explain what you mean by linear perspective?
Sure. Linear perspective is a technique for creating the illusion of depth on a flat surface. It's based on geometry. You have a vanishing point, and lines recede toward it. The idea was rediscovered and formalized by the architect Filippo Brunelleschi in the early 1400s.
And it reflects a new confidence in observation and measurement, in human reason. It's not just an artistic trick. It's a statement about how people understand space, order, and their place in the universe.
That's also part of the broader intellectual climate. Renaissance thinkers believed they could unlock the secrets of nature. Artists were engaging with anatomy, optics, even engineering.
So art and science were kind of linked?
Very much so. Take Leonardo da Vinci. He studied anatomy by dissecting human bodies. His art is full of scientific observation, and his notebooks are filled with sketches of flying machines and hydraulic systems.
Okay, that's really cool. So were all artists just working for the church?
Not anymore. In the medieval world, the Catholic Church was the main patron of the arts. But by the Renaissance, especially in Italy, wealthy families and civic governments start commissioning art. Think of the Medici in Florence. They hired painters, sculptors, and architects not just to glorify God, but to glorify themselves and their city.
This connects to the rise of civic pride and individual ambition. Cities competed with each other through art. A beautiful church or town hall was a symbol of prosperity and prestige.
So art becomes political?
Absolutely. Look at Donatello's statue of David. It's a biblical figure, but it also becomes a symbol of Florence, a small, scrappy city standing up to powerful enemies. Art carries messages about power, identity, even resistance.
And there's also a revolution in architecture. Renaissance architects like Alberti and Brunelleschi brought back classical principles, symmetry, proportion, and columns, but applied them in new ways. They saw architecture as a science, something that could be rationally designed to reflect harmony and order.
I've seen pictures of Brunelleschi's dome in Florence. How did he even build that?
Ingeniously. It was the largest dome built since antiquity, and he did it without scaffolding all the way to the top. He used herringbone brick patterns, a double shell structure, and chains to hold the weight. It was an engineering marvel.
And it became a symbol of Florentine achievement. This was a city saying, "We are heirs to Rome, and we've surpassed it."
So, what about sculpture? You mentioned Donatello. Is he different from Michelangelo?
Donatello came earlier, in the early 1400s. His David is small, bronze, and youthful, the first freestanding nude statue since ancient Rome. Michelangelo's David, a century later, is huge, marble, idealized, and deeply psychological. He's not in action. He's thinking, coiled with tension. It's a portrait of human potential and inner strength.
You're seeing the Renaissance interest in the individual, not just physically but mentally and emotionally. The artist is exploring character, not just copying nature.
That's really different from what came before. Did people think of artists differently too?
Yes, that's a really important point. During the Middle Ages, artists were considered skilled laborers, like stonemasons or carpenters. But in the Renaissance, especially in Italy, a new idea starts to take shape: the artist as genius.
This shift happens alongside humanism. If you believe humans have great potential and creative power, it follows that some individuals, like artists, might be exceptional. Genius was seen not just as talent, but as divine inspiration. People began to see painting as a form of intellectual labor, not just craftsmanship.
And this elevated status wasn't just symbolic. Artists like Michelangelo or Raphael signed contracts, negotiated fees, and even advised popes and princes. Their reputations spread across Europe. In a way, they were the first celebrity creators.
So art becomes about the artist, not just the subject?
Exactly. Self-portraits become more common. Artists include their faces in crowds or paint in personal symbols. It's a subtle way of saying, "I made this and my mind matters."
That's so different from how anonymous medieval art was.
Right. In medieval cathedrals, you often don't know who carved the figures or painted the walls. In the Renaissance, people start asking, who painted this? The personality behind the work becomes part of the meaning.
Okay, so now I'm wondering, was art just about religion and politics, or was it used in everyday life too?
Great question. Art was everywhere, not just in palaces and churches. In cities like Florence or Bruges, shops used painted signs, elaborate displays, and symbolic imagery to advertise what they sold. A shoemaker might display a beautifully painted image of a foot. A barber's shop might have saints associated with healing.
Think of it like early branding. In a mostly illiterate society, visual symbols were powerful tools for communication. Artists created shop signs, product labels, even advertisements for theatrical performances or public festivals.
And there's a whole visual economy at work. Businesses competed for attention through color, style, and clever visual metaphors. What we think of as commercial art begins to develop in this period.
So even back then, people were using images to sell stuff?
Absolutely. Renaissance art wasn't separate from the real world. It was entangled with it. It was sacred and secular, elite and popular, beautiful and useful.
So that's what it looked like in Italy, but what about the rest of Europe? Was the Renaissance the same in the North?
Great question. The Northern Renaissance shared a lot of the humanist values, but the art looked quite different. Northern artists were masters of detail and symbolism, often using oil paint to build up layers of light and texture. Instead of classical ruins and idealized nudes, you get domestic interiors, merchants, and portraits full of moral meaning.
Do you have any examples?
Absolutely. One is The Moneylender and His Wife by Quentin Massys. It shows a man counting coins while his wife, who was supposed to be reading a devotional book, looks over at the money. The detail is incredible, reflections in glass, textures on the wood grain, but what really matters is the message. It's about greed, distraction, the tension between spiritual and material values.
And that tells us something about the North, especially cities like Antwerp, where banking and trade were booming. These societies were grappling with wealth and morality in new ways.
Another example is Hans Holbein's The Ambassadors. It looks like a double portrait of two rich diplomats surrounded by globes, books, and instruments. But then, if you look closely, there's a distorted skull at the bottom. It's only visible from the side.
Wait, why put a skull in a portrait?
It's a symbol of mortality, a memento mori. All the wealth and knowledge in the world can't stop death. Holbein's painting is a visual puzzle, a reflection on pride, science, politics, and the limits of human power.
It's also a reminder that Renaissance art wasn't just about celebrating beauty. It was full of questions, ironies, anxieties. That's what makes it so rich.
Wow, I never realized how much these paintings were saying, even silently.
That's the magic of it. Renaissance art teaches us to look closely, not just with our eyes, but with our minds.
Thank you so much, Professor Romano. This has been amazing. I feel like I'll never look at art the same way again.
My pleasure, Casey. Art is history in color and light, and it's always worth studying.
And worth rethinking, too. Every generation finds new meanings.
Thanks for listening to the Once and Future Present. Next episode, we dive into questions surrounding the how women experience the Renaissance. Until next time, stay curious and think critically.